The riddle surrounding Pastor Joel Osteen has finally been solved, and the outcome is not good. Millions of Americans watch Pastor Joel Osteen's signature message of prosperity and optimism every Sunday. His flawless smile could be seen on TVs all around the country. For many Americans, Osteen has become the amiable face of contemporary Christianity thanks to his best-selling books, sold-out stadium performances, and a church that was formerly the Houston Rockets basketball arena. A preacher who asserts that having faith will bring prosperity in all facets of life. But beyond that million-dollar smile and meticulously produced image lies a tangle of contradictions and serious problems that have troubled Osteen's ministry for years. The discrepancy between Osteen's public image and the reality of his business has become unavoidable, from his $10.5 million estate in Houston's most upscale neighborhood to the enigmatic finding of cash and checks concealed in the church walls. According to a former employee of Lakewood Church who spent more than 5 years working closely with the Osteenine family, what you see on television is a meticulously crafted product. The Joel who preaches about sacrifice and humility on Sunday mornings has a life of luxury and privilege that most of his followers would be shocked to see up close. Indeed, even though he preaches about God's abundance and blessings, religious scholars, former insiders, and even devout Christians have expressed grave concerns about his personal wealth and the ways his ministry functions, questioning whether his understanding of the gospel is consistent with Jesus' teachings. Dr. Michael Wilson, a professor of religious studies who has spent decades researching America's megachurch movement, pointed out that there has always been a gap between the pastors who live in mansions and the carpenter from Nazareth who had nowhere to sleep. However, the Osteen example illustrates something more concerning: a deliberate attempt to reframe Christianity as a means of achieving financial success while eschewing the difficult moral requirements at the core of the religion. The revelations from former Lakewood Church staff members, who portray an organization that operates more like a business than a ministry and where choices about sermons, outreach, and even charitable endeavors are made based more on revenue potential, brand management, and market research than on spiritual discernment, may be the most startling of all. The actual character of Osteen's ministry was exposed to the world in 2017 when Hurricane Harvey destroyed Houston, leaving thousands homeless and in dire need of refuge. And despite his constant efforts to uphold his meticulously constructed identity, what emerged during that crisis still haunts his public image. We're finally unraveling the riddle around one of the most prominent and contentious religious figures in America today. By revealing the shocking inconsistencies between the message and the messenger, Joel Osteen's empire raises important issues regarding faith, riches, and authenticity in contemporary American religion. God is in charge. That you cannot experience anything without his consent. This was their choice. The mansion of faith. The extravagant way of life that contradicts the message. Joel Osteen's public image is meticulously created around his welcoming smile, humble manner, and words of gratitude in God's generosity. He regularly speaks to his congregation and television viewers about the value of achieving contentment, remaining humble before God, and being grateful for life's small pleasures. This simple exterior conceals the immense wealth and luxury that define Osteen's real existence, which contrasts sharply with both his modest public demeanor and the traditional Christian virtues of sacrifice and humility. A former security contractor who worked at the Osteenine residence for multiple events described the stark contrast between Joel Osteenine's real life and the person you see on television. He lives in a mansion that would make most celebrities jealous, despite his sermons about being thankful for the little things in life. The 17,000-square-foot residence in Houston's most upscale neighborhood, River Oaks, is estimated to be for $10.5 million. Behind towering iron gates that provide seclusion and protection, the property has 6 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, 3 lifts, a pool house and a guest house. Previous guests mentioned the home's beautiful woodwork, marble floors, and crystal chandeliers. He teaches humility from a house bigger than most hotels, noted religious scholar Dr. Robert Jenkins, who has written extensively on the prosperity gospel movement. There's a fundamental mismatch between living in a level of luxury that most of your followers can't even imagine and advising them to be happy with what they have. The Osteen residence is only one element of a way of life that would appear to be at variance with Jesus' teachings regarding wealth and material belongings, including private jet flights, fancy cars, and designer apparel. According to former employees, Osteen has been spotted sporting watches costing more than $15,000 and his wardrobe is mostly made up of custom-tailored suits that cost thousands of dollars each. What makes this opulent lifestyle particularly interesting is how it's financed. When people ask about Osteen's riches, his supporters frequently point to the fact that he has publicly declared since 2004 that he does not receive a salary from Lakewood Church. Rather, his several best-selling novels, which have reportedly brought in tens of millions of dollars, are the main source of his income. One of the best public relations strategies in Christian history, according to a former publishing executive who collaborated with a number of prosperity gospel writers, is the "I don't take a church salary" line. It gives the appearance of sacrifice while hiding the fact that the book's primary selling point is the church platform. It's similar to a famous person claiming they don't get paid to appear on magazine covers. They don't have to, as their actual revenue is generated by the publicity. Being a tax-free religious organization, Lakewood Church is immune from paying property taxes on its enormous facility, the former Compaq Center, which was once the home of the Houston Rockets, and is not obligated to make its financial information available to the public. According to experts in religious finance, the church receives between 70 and 90 million tax-free donations a year. However, it does not provide its members with comprehensive financial statements, in contrast to many traditional churches. Osteen's personal wealth is likewise opaque in terms of finances. Because of the intricate structure of his economic ventures and the secrecy granted to religious organizations under U.S. tax law, it is challenging to ascertain his exact net worth, which is estimated to be between $50 million and $100 million. According to theologian Dr. Sarah Mitchell, there was radical financial transparency in the early Christian church. According to the Book of Acts, Christians shared their resources freely and made sure that no one went without while others enjoyed luxury. The contrary strategy is exemplified by Osteen's organization, which purposefully keeps information regarding money opaque to keep followers from seeing the whole picture. Congregants are constantly urged to contribute liberally as a sign of their faith, according to former Lakewood employees, who also describe an organizational culture that paradoxically emphasizes and obscures money. There was always this disconnect between the constant appeals for donations and the obvious wealth of the leadership, a former Lakewood administrative staffer who asked to remain anonymous said, adding that the specifics of how those donations are spent are still mostly hidden from view. Many employees quietly questioned why a company with such vast resources needed to keep requesting more, even though we were instructed to stress that donating was about sowing seeds for God's blessing. When compared to the financial realities of many Lakewood attendees, the lifestyle gap is even more pronounced. Demographic data indicates that a sizable percentage of Osteen's followers are from lower to middle-class origins, and many of them make selfless contributions to the ministry in spite of their personal financial difficulties. Jenkins noted that there are people who are living paycheck to paycheck and contributing money they can hardly afford because they think it would result in a financial gift from God. In the meantime, the individual who is urging them to donate their life is in a private residence. That raises a core ethical issue that transcends religion and touches on issues of justice and openness. Osteen's supporters contend that he deserves the benefits of his accomplishment and that his books are the main source of his fortune. They point out that he transformed Lakewood into America's biggest church and spreads his message of hope to millions of people. According to this viewpoint, his success merely proves the ideas he espouses, which include that God rewards those who are dependable and upbeat. Critics reply that this defense misses the fundamental conflicts between Osteen's lifestyle with the clear teachings of Jesus about wealth, who cautioned about the spiritual perils of riches and exhorted his disciples to selfless giving. Additionally, they wonder if Osteen's riches truly counts given that the stark divide between leader and followers leads to a society in which those with the least contribute to the lifestyle of those with the most. Mitchell claimed that this arrangement would have scandalized the early church. Jesus did not suggest that wealthy people with private aircraft and mansions are blessed. On the contrary, Jesus argued that wealthy people find it extremely difficult to enter God's kingdom. You won't hear that message in a sermon by Joel Osteen. You should get rid of that illness, but recovery is on the way. You should be in debt because of that poor break. Shut the doors. Everything was revealed by the Hurricane Harvey affair. Hurricane Harvey hit the Texas coast in late August 2017, bringing with it record-breaking rains and devastating flooding in Houston. The enormous Lakewood church structure, a 16,800-seat former sports arena that appeared to be the perfect spot to house flood victims, gained notice when the city flooded and thousands of inhabitants were forced from their houses and frantically sought refuge. Aspects of Joel Osteen's ministry that had been effectively hidden by years of meticulously planned public relations were revealed in what turned out to be one of the most illuminating episodes of his public career. Social media users started to wonder why Lakewood Church, one of the biggest structures in Houston, was still blocked to those seeking shelter as the city's waters surged and emergency shelters soon filled up. The church's exterior seemed to be accessible and entirely intact in photos that went viral, defying Lakewood's official assertion that the building was inaccessible because of heavy flooding. H was drowning. His doors were locked, recalled Maria Gonzalez, a Houston resident who sought refuge at different locales during the crisis after losing her home due to flooding. We only wanted them to open a building that is mostly unoccupied throughout the week to keep people dry and secure. We weren't requesting cash or preferential treatment. As news agencies began covering the issue, the public's outcry quickly rose, drawing a comparison between Lakewood's shuttered doors and the many smaller churches and mosques in Houston that had quickly opened as emergency shelters despite having far fewer resources than Osteen's mega ministry. Robert Downen, a former reporter for the Houston Chronicle who covered the incident, detailed the quickly developing PR catastrophe. The mismatch between Osteen's incessant preaching of Christian love and giving and his seeming unwillingness to disrupt his organization in order to aid those in need was what made the situation especially harmful. For many Houstonians, it was the pinnacle of hypocrisy. Lakewood Church released a number of changing statements as the criticism grew. They began by saying that the structure was inaccessible. Photos that refuted this story claimed that the facility was unsafe because the basement levels were flooded, but this didn't explain why the top floors couldn't be used. After days of heartbreaking public outcry, they finally declared that the church will open as a supply delivery hub and then as a refuge. According to crisis management specialist Rebecca Simon, Osteen's reputation suffered greatly as a result of the shifting justifications. The audience would have been understanding if the church had just opened right away, notwithstanding any valid practical issues. Rather than showing real concern, their hesitancy and subsequent shifting of their explanations gave the appearance that they were reacting to negative publicity. Many people were especially concerned by Osteen's first reaction to the disaster. Houston's social media pages continued to post generic inspirational comments while he was underwater, failing to acknowledge the catastrophe or provide any particular assistance. After days of public criticism, he eventually addressed the matter head-on, but it seemed more reactionary than productive. Later, former Lakewood employees disclosed that deeper institutional interests that were typically kept out of the public eye were mirrored in the delayed response. According to a former Lakewood facilities manager, there was instant worry about possible harm to the structure and machinery. Infrastructure, carpeting, and audiovisual equipment had cost millions of dollars. The conversations I overheard focused more on safeguarding those resources than on the number of people we could assist. It was an eye-opening experience that revealed the real priorities. Other former employees spoke of a leadership culture that prioritized image control over emergency reaction. Organizing assistance was not the focus of the initial discussions. According to a former member of the communications team who want to remain anonymous, they were about messaging and how to handle the PR problem. The immediate needs of flood victims were not as important as the perception of Lakewood. The Harvey incident was especially noteworthy because it ran counter to the meticulously crafted narrative Osteen had developed over many years. His message always focused on plenty, optimism, and God's blessings. When a real crisis arose, a theology that appeared unprepared to deal with genuine human pain and sacrifice. According to religious expert Dr. Michael Wilson, prosperity theology appears attractive when things are going well. However, it lacks the spiritual resources necessary to deal with true tragedy, sacrifice, and pain. Since that type of sacrifice isn't included in the prosperity gospel story, Osteenian theology had no foundation for prioritizing institutional comfort over individual need when Harvey struck. It stood in stark contrast to other religious organizations during the same period. While Lakewood Mattress Mac had significantly more resources, several smaller synagogues, churches, and mosques in Houston opened as shelters right away. Osteen's tardy response was compared negatively to a local furniture company owner who made national headlines for opening his showrooms to flood victims right away. Wilson pointed out that the Harvey event exposed a basic conflict at the core of Osteen's ministry, not just a PR blunder. His message is about living your life to the fullest and enjoying God's many bounties. However, the fundamental principles of Christianity, sacrifice, service, and putting others before oneself, seem to be lacking during those pivotal early days of the deluge. Even though Lakewood finally reopened and helped with relief operations, Osteen's reputation suffered significant and long-lasting harm. The event left a lasting impression that Lakewood prioritized self-protection over self-sacrifice when forced to choose between providing for immediate human needs and institutional comfort. Houston was drowning. He had shut his doors. Evolved into something greater than a critique of a particular ruling. When put to the test by a real-world catastrophe, it became a metaphor for the seeming discrepancy between Osteen's inspirational speeches and the organization's true priorities. I don't blame them if they don't, but this is simply how I choose to live my life and what I teach based on the Bible. Therefore, I don't believe that Jesus avoids discussing sin, damnation, or harsh realities while promoting wealth and avoiding hardship. What Joel Osteen doesn't say is one of the most notable features of his ministry and possibly the secret to his enormous appeal. Osteen has built his brand on a purposefully selective version of Christianity that stresses positive thinking while avoiding these more difficult aspects of the faith. Traditional Christian preaching usually places a great deal of emphasis on human sinfulness, the reality of divine judgment, and the call to moral transformation. Theologian Dr. Richard Martinez, who has examined Osteen's teachings over a 15-year span, noted that he skips anything disagreeable and smiles throughout every talk. The Bible's real substance and the subjects Jesus taught in his sermons simply do not encompass complete categories of teaching, especially when it comes to divine judgment, human brokenness, and the price of discipleship. Anyone conversant with Orthodox theology can see this selective approach to Christian doctrine right away. Osteen hardly ever speaks of sin, steers clear of the idea of hell, and seldom ever brings up Jesus' many teachings on the perils of money or the need for selfless service. His teachings, on the other hand, almost entirely center on themes of material blessing, positive thinking, and personal empowerment. According to comparative religion professor Dr. Sarah Mitchell, it's Christianity with all the awkward parts taken out. Jesus discussed money more than nearly any other subject, but the main focus of his teachings was on the spiritual perils of it as well as the need for altruistic giving. This is entirely reversed by Ain, who portrays money as a sign of God's favor rather than a spiritual danger. This selective theology, according to former Lakewood Church insiders, is not just a particular emphasis or interpretation but a purposeful marketing tactic. The subjects that would or would not resonate with the target audience were discussed in detail. Disclosed that Osteen's messages were created by a former content developer. Everything that could cause discomfort or interfere with people's way of life was methodically eliminated. Theological faithfulness was not the aim. It was the expansion and retention of the audience. This strategy is part of Lakewood's larger ministry concept and goes beyond Osteen's sermons. Despite being frequently asked to clarify his opinions in media interviews, Osteen has consistently avoided taking firm stances on issues ranging from abortion to same-sex marriage to racial justice, in contrast to many churches that uphold specific doctrinal positions on contentious social or moral issues. According to a former Lakewood executive pastor, the purposeful vagueness is strategic. You risk alienating a portion of your audience once you adopt a strong stance on any contentious topic. You keep your appeal as wide as possible by staying ambiguous and concentrating only on your own positive outlook. It's a commercial choice disguised as religious modesty. Osteen also avoids controversy when it comes to political matters. Osteen has meticulously maintained a studied neutrality that detractors claim is a surrender of moral leadership, in contrast to many well-known pastors on the religious right and left who address legislative issues they believe to be ethically essential. He avoids politics, but that isn't the issue. According to renowned ethicist Dr. James Peterson, many religious leaders who are thoughtful do it. His avoidance of moral clarity on matters where the Christian tradition has historically felt obligated to comment is the problem. Being silent on matters of justice, oppression, and human dignity while claiming to be a representative of Christianity turns that silence into a moral stance. This chosen approach is especially notable because of how drastically it deviates from the historical Christian tradition while maintaining its identity and authority. Across denominations, traditional Christian preaching has often balanced what theologians refer to as law and gospel. The difficult requirements of God's moral standards as well as the kind offering of pardon and peacemaking. According to Martinez, Osteen provides the solace without the difficulty, the blessing without the requirement. It would be equivalent to recommending Christianity's dessert course without the main course. Aesthetically pleasing but ultimately devoid of the nourishing content that the faith was intended to offer. The psychological attractiveness of this method was explained by former Lakewood attendees, especially for people who are dealing with life's obstacles or who are harboring guilt about previous transgressions. "It felt like such a relief when I first started attending," said Rebecca Johnson, a previous participant. "My previous church experience had been heavy on guilt and judgment. Joel made me feel good about myself and my future. It was only years later that I realized something essential was missing. Any real call to moral transformation or service beyond self-improvement. This emphasis on positive thinking and personal blessing rather than moral transformation or social responsibility has drawn sharp criticism from theologians across the denominational spectrum. Both conservative evangelical leaders and progressive mainline scholars have questioned whether Osteen's teaching represents authentic Christianity or a form of motivational speaking dressed in religious language. When Jesus said, "Take up your cross and follow me," he wasn't describing a pathway to your best life now, noted evangelical theologian Dr. Mark Simmons. The cross represents suffering and sacrifice, precisely the elements Osteen systematically eliminates from his message. The result is something that might make people feel better temporarily, but fails to address the deeper human need for moral purpose and transcendent meaning. Perhaps most telling is Osteen's approach to human suffering and injustice. While traditional Christian theology has devoted considerable attention to making sense of pain and developing resources for confronting evil, Osteen's messages typically treat suffering as either a temporary setback on the path to blessing or the result of negative thinking patterns that can be overcome through changed attitudes. There's almost no theological framework in Osteen's teaching for addressing genuine tragedy or systemic injustice, observed Mitchell. When faced with cancer, poverty, or oppression, the prosperity gospel has little to offer beyond "stay positive and expect your miracle." A message that can become cruel when the miracle doesn't materialize. This theological selectivity creates a religious product perfectly calibrated for the modern consumer mentality. Christianity is a self-improvement program rather than a call to moral transformation and service to others. By systematically removing the challenging demands while retaining the comforting promises, Osteen has created a message with enormous appeal in a culture already oriented toward comfort and convenience. He's mastered the art of making people feel spiritual without actually challenging them to change, concluded Martinez. That's an incredibly marketable skill in contemporary America and a fundamental betrayal of the tradition he claims to represent. Think of it like this. For every peace dealer you allow in your life, you are 20% more likely to live stressed, on edge, to have a crisis. Corporate faith, former staff say it's AM. Media empire,